Hey, welcome to my channel, Running Wild. I am coach and runner Sandy Nighthaver, and I have a more of a unique video for me to share with you. I'm not going to talk too much because there's a lot I have to show you. And what it's going to be is the movement assessment I had when I first started working with my strength coach, and then we're going to jump to the present. Actually, it was about a month ago now where I Sage, thank you for filming Sage, filmed the strength session with me and my strength coach, and it really shows the progression I've made working with the strength coach. And I just want to quickly say, sharing a movement assessment of myself, it's kind of vulnerable, right? Because when I first started working with Kevin, even though I've been strength training all my life, I did not look very good, and I also didn't feel very good. So even though I was doing all this strength training stuff on my own, it makes a huge difference to have somebody watch you and somebody correct you and somebody who does this kind of thing on a daily basis. And I learned so much from Kevin. And he also took me to a place where things in my body just were aching. My feet were aching, sometimes my back or my hips would be aching. My form just felt really weird. And now I'm in a place where nothing hurts. I still have things I'm working on, but my feet never hurt me anymore, and my knees never hurt, which is just it's really incredible the changes I've made. I guess about a year and a half working with Kevin. And so I really want to share with you that, if you're nervous about somebody looking at your own form, like a coach or a strength trainer or a PT, and worrying about them judging you, just know they're not judging you. They're trying to help you. And so please don't be afraid to ask for help if you feel like you need it. And I hope putting myself out there with my movement assessment, encourages other people to ask for help as well. And also, if you want to work with Kevin, please go to his website or follow him on Instagram, which I'll link in the description below. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really does help me out.
All right, Sandy, one of the big things I tell people is you don't want to take whatever I'm going to talk about and just try to automatically correct it. The body's doing what it's doing for a reason. There may be a mobility issue somewhere. There may be a stability issue somewhere. What we want to do is make sure that we're stretching what needs to be stretched, strengthening what needs to be strengthened, and then incorporating some pattern work so that we can re-educate the system. So just taking a quick look at posture. Some of the things I look at is just say the wrinkling on the shirt. So it's a little bit more activity going on, wrinkling here than we have over here. What we're going to see is when we turn you around to the backside view, definitely a little bit kinked up in the hips, and oftentimes that comes from some malalignment around the pelvis of the SI joint. So as we go through stretching, pushing, pulling, ideally that stuff's going to start to level out. And then we do have some counter rotation moves that we're going to give you so that you can actually work on this on a daily basis versus just the times you say go see a therapist to get those things worked out. All right, side view. If we draw a plumb line from your ankle going all the way up, and remember, any of these lines are being drawn with my fingers, so they're not exact. But we still get the idea that knees are a little bit forward of that line, hips are a little bit forward of that line, shoulders a little bit, and head a little bit. So you've kind of got everything shifted forward, and that's going to end up putting a lot of weight into the ball of your foot all the time. And you'll notice, this is kind of a cool drill, if you take your hand and put it at your low back, so the back of your hand, kind of like if you were reaching around the old handcuff position, if you shift back so that your hips are lined up over your ankles, those muscles are going to soften up, those paraspinal muscles down there at your low back. And then if all you do is shift forward like you are with your posture here and get the weight a little more onto the ball of your foot, you're going to feel those muscles turn on. So if we start getting outside of the plumb line, your body has to do something funky in order to keep you in position. Downside to that is turning those muscles on like that and leaving them on all the time, there's going to be some fatigue that kicks in. So what we want to do is work on getting your hip lined up over your ankle instead of in front of your ankle. The other thing I see here is a little bit of an exaggerated curve at your low back, so kind of getting those lumbar facets crunched a little bit. And that's with the hips being forward, you're actually bringing the shoulders back a little bit. And then that combination, so hips forward, shoulders back, creates an increase right there at the low back. All right, so here's where we can see a little bit more with the hips, just easier to see on the back side. One way is just looking at the orientation or space between the arm and the body. So we can see we're a little bit shorter on the left side versus on the right side. And even that hand's not hanging down quite as low on the left side as on the right side. So body is either the hips coming up, shoulders coming down, but we're definitely crunching in on that left side a little bit. All right, toe touch reach back. I'm looking for a lot of movement through the hips. So oftentimes what we do is we get into substituting a lot of lumbar movement for hip movement. So when you go down to the toe touch, I want to see you driving your hips as far back behind you as possible before you start to fold down to touch your toes. So we're pretty good. So right about here is where your hip hinge stops. So any movement we see beyond here has to come from your spine. And it's a lot of rounding. So we weren't bad in how we initiated it. I'm going to ask for you to exaggerate it a little bit more just to make sure we're sparing the back as often as possible. From the standpoint of range, you're getting down there to the toes, so I'm happy with that. The reach back. So I'd definitely like to see some more hip shift forward. We want to get your hips out here. So the center of your hip, in a perfect world, if we could get out a little bit closer to that line, that would be ideal. So sometimes that's going to be a little tightness in the hip flexors and quads. Odds are there's some of that going on. Other times it's just not a pattern we're accustomed to producing, so it's just more faulty mechanics than it is something by way of a restriction. But when we start looking at thoracic spine, we're pretty straight right here and back to crunching those facet joints. So once we get into too much extension, always staying in extension, those little joints where the vertebrae attaches to the next one, we're really compressing and crunching in on those, and over time that can become an issue. And then when we look at something like running downhill, as soon as your foot hits, the pelvis gets rotated forward, and that increases the curve at the low back. So if you're already kind of hanging out in a position where you've exaggerated that curve to begin with, it's really going to take a pounding with all your downhill running. So we're going to work on mobilizing your thoracic spine and your hip flexors to help clean that up. All right, with rotation, so we're looking at left-right symmetry, and what I want to see is your backside shoulder blade visible to us when you rotate. And I'm going to stop you on the second one with each, just in case you got a little bit of extra room. All right, so not really seeing the shoulder there. And sometimes this comes from the hips, sometimes it comes from the spine. So at this point, all we knew was you're not rotating as well as we'd like for you to. And then we also found that you did have a little asymmetry when we got you down on the floor, so that going to the right, not as quite as well as going to the left there. And then what we found with your hips, you internally rotate fantastically, but the external rotation is where we're going to need to do some more work for you. And that's what I look at with the single leg stuff. I'm really comparing one side to the other. Are we rotating, way in here more than we'd be rotating to the outside? And you're almost at about a 1-to-1 in this position. But when we got you down on the floor, you definitely internally rotated further than you externally rotated. And then I'll look at things like how does one leg compare to the other. So with this, pretty much is just confirming. So you're rotating pretty well there, but your external, not so hot. We'd like for you to get turned almost twice as far as you are there. However, we talked about it, so I'm not going to beat you to death on the video. All right, with the deep squat, I'm drawing a plumb line right down the middle of you. I want to see you maintain equal parts left side, right side as you descend into the squat. I want to see the dowel remaining parallel to the floor. We're looking at hip, knee, foot alignment, so we obviously know we don't want your knees buckling in. But I'm also going to check to see whether or not you're doing anything funny with your feet in order to accomplish all that. So we're pretty symmetrical in your start position. And let's see how you look as you drop down. So a little slide onto your right side there, and that right knee is starting to buckle in a little bit. So everything is just shifting a little that way, and then this knee is coming in a little bit, and this knee is actually going out a little bit. Easier to see when I do that. So squatting kind of gets looked at as the be-all, end-all exercise, but I honestly have so many different ways to make your legs stronger. We want to work on the ability to squat, it doesn't mean we have to turn it into a primary strengthening move. So we're going to do drills to get your squat pattern better. If we get it cleaned up nicely, we'll move into using the squat as a strength move. But right now, we're going to use everything else for strength and then work on cleaning up your squat just so that your basic functional movement is a little bit cleaner. So from the side view, the biggest thing I'm looking at is where you initiate your movement. So whichever joint moves first is going to take more torque, meaning the muscles that operate that joint are going to do more work. So what I want to see are your hips shifting backwards first. And shifting and tilting are two totally different things. So we already have just a little bit of an anterior pelvic tilt just with your start position here. And then as you start to squat, so right there, instead of hips back, that's pelvis forward or rotating the pelvis forward. So that number. And then again, all that's going to do is increase that crunching of those facet joints down there at your low back. So now we're getting a good hip hinge. And we don't look too bad once we get down to the bottom. So overhinging at the hips, if we trace the line of your shin and then the line of your torso, in a perfect world, we'd like for those lines to be parallel, whereas you're here. And primary reason for that is some of the tightness in your thoracic spine. It's a little bit harder for you to be a little more upright with the torso posture. So not to worry, we have some drills to work on that. And in the backside view, a lot of times it's just an easier position to see the same stuff we were looking at on the front side. So there's that shift over onto your right side. So you're already sliding over on that first move. And that can happen for a number of reasons. Sometimes the opposite side ankle might have been an issue at some point, so you're getting off of that side to create more movement. We can see you're starting to spin that left foot a little bit as you go. And then other times it could be a weakness on this hip, so it's not able to balance you and keep you in position. And it gets a little bit better as you go. Feet are dipping in a little bit, starting to see a little bit more here on the right side. And again, this is all the stuff that we saw in the front view. All right, moving on. So double reach back. We're looking at patterns, so comparing one pattern to another pattern. So don't think so much specifically about the shoulder or the T-spine. It's going to be a combination. So anytime there's some restriction in the thoracic spine, so inability to extend, that's typically going to show up with some sort of shoulder dysfunction. And when we see an asymmetry with rotation, same kind of thing. So there's this relationship where the T-spine can impact the low back, the neck, as well as shoulder function. And I'll catch you on the second one in case you got a little stretch with each. So we definitely noticed that we've got a little bit of work to do in this department. I think most of it's going to be your thoracic spine versus your shoulder specifically. Definitely looking at some right shoulder internal rotation. And chicken or the egg, was the T-spine the reason the shoulder dysfunction started? Who knows? And honestly, at this point, we don't really care. So we're just not rotating internally as well on the right side as we are the left. But I can also see more manipulation of your spine. You're extending more, trying to get that arm back. So just a lot more funkiness with the left arm high, right arm low, but we'll work on cleaning that up. All right, single leg squat. So we want your shoulders to be parallel to the floor, your waistline parallel to the floor, and then hip, knee, foot alignment. So those are our big keys. So you can see is a pretty good amount of hip drop. So as you initiate, before you start going down, we're nice and level here. And then as you drop down, we're seeing this hip drop and then knee coming in. And these are extremely common things, so don't sweat it. Now we're going to compare that to the other side. And some of that's going to be strength, but a lot of it's going to be patterning. So we can get everything strong, but if we don't teach it how it's supposed to work, it doesn't really matter. So we've got some of the hip drop going on, not as much. I mean, the knee wiggling, that's the knee looking for a little stability. But when we look at those two positions, clear those lines off, we're a little bit better on the left leg than we are on the right leg. So that position looks a little bit better, screen right on your left leg versus screen left on your right leg. So right leg mechanics will be a focus, but we need to do a little bit of work on both of them. All right, so we talked about this and went through it. We want to make sure that the bridge is felt in your glutes. Glutes are your primary hip extensor. If you feel something other than that, that's what you're substituting with doing an exercise as well as when you're running. In straight leg raise, we're looking at the ability to bring one leg up and keep the other one down. So it's not necessarily, oh, we're checking a hamstring, or we're checking a hip flexor. We're checking that ability to scissor the legs. You start looking at top end speed, we need more of that ability. When you start looking at running uphill, we need a little bit more of that ability. And then if you're doing a crazy trail race where you may be stepping up things, obviously we really need that ability. So this looks pretty good. We're getting a little rise on the bottom leg, so a little space popping up under the leg as you raise the top one up. But in the grand scheme, it's not horrible. And it does look like the right side is maybe popping up a little bit more. So next time we're in person, we're going to double check exactly where it's coming from, whether it's a little tightness in the hip flexor or the hamstring going up. So all in all, not too bad. We're going to do some work on more strength in your hips, a little more stability as well as external rotation and mobility, and then some thoracic extension, and then the rest of it is just making sure that we get nice and strong and have you nice and resilient out there.
A very, very special guest today who means a lot to me. He's helped me so much in the past year and a half, and that is my strength coach, Kevin. He's really been wonderful, and to pick up on some of his wisdom, I want you to be able to follow him. So Kevin, please tell people where they can follow you.
Probably easiest place to find me is KP_performance on Instagram. I pretty much put everything up there, and if you have some interest, you can DM me there or go to the website, kpperformanceboulder.com. Just fill out the contact form, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
That's pretty good.
Okay.
I somehow managed to do like back-to-back performance over the weekend.
Okay.
And so like my right hip is a little tired, but otherwise like I feel really good.
Okay. You feel like each leg was doing what it's supposed to do and all that fun stuff?
Yeah. Overall, like I think.
Your own style, that's just slang for you, ain't got it though. Talking like you got it, that's a problem, I might let them know. Freeze you like I'm Elsa, so my let it go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Head to toe, said you got your own style, that's just slang for you, ain't got it though. Talking like you got it, that's a problem, I might let them know. Freeze you like I'm Elsa, so my let it go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Never know, talking like Geronimo, get dropped down like some dominoes. Blues and greens and pinks, I got a lot of those. Yeah, you know, talking slime, I can't relate to snakes, I see a lot of foes. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Head to toe, said you got your own style, that's just slang for you, ain't got it though. Talking like you got it, that's a problem, I might let them know. Freeze you like I'm Elsa, so my let it go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Keeping it here versus the squat.
Okay.
And then after the 15, sled, as fast as you can go down, as fast as you can go coming back.
Okay.
Best sustainable pace, we're going to call it.
Okay.
I don't want it to be as fast as you can go down and then you have to crawl back.
Okay. The hardest part for me is always turning the sled around.
I will be a nice guy today since the cameras are rolling, and I will turn the sled around for you, okay? Not quite as much knee bend.
Okay.
There you go.
Oh, feeling the hamstrings.
Yep. So basically, this gets more hip dominant, and then the sled we go to more knee dominant.
Okay.
So it's just trying to give you both variations in. All right. Got it. I got it.
Okay. Thanks.
Right.
Good job. tough.
And rest.
What weight is this kettlebell?
35.
35. Oh wow.
Want to try it?
No.
Is that embarrassing? Yeah, you wore jeans.
I don't have very many clothes left.
That's true.
I don't know if I have any athletic
It's a
pants.
good excuse.
We might have just saved
I
some.
don't think much of what I have is going to fit you, otherwise I'd be happy with anything I have. So we're going to load it also. So it's going to be band underfoot, over shoulder. So you're basically stepping off of the box. But I don't want you to put a lot of weight on the back foot.
Okay.
So band is under the front foot on the box. And you're staying on top of that foot and then coming up with a knee drive. Instead of a traditional step down where you push off the back foot.
Okay.
We like to take a lot of traditional exercises and put a little something strange to it.
Nice. Yeah,
Really
it's a
to
big
make it
challenge.
apply more for the sport.
Yeah, yeah, all the balance and dynamic.
Yeah. When we started looking at something like runner or trail runner, using the band is going to allow her to accelerate through the movement, and you're a little springier versus just slow movement with traditional lifting. It needs to be pulling you down so that we're really driving off that leg to get that. I know you know how to do this.
Yeah. That's how I feel when you're you. I have better form that way after watching you.
It's my 2 reps of a bunch of exercises all day long. As you turn, give it just a little bit of pressing away from you. Yeah, you'll feel everything lock in a little bit more through the stomach.
Said you got your own style, that's just like for you, ain't got it though. Talking like you got it, that's a problem, I might let them know. Freeze you like a mouse or something, let it go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. 10 toes, keep it thorough, stepping out for sure, though, time to let them know. Rubber bands, I got a lot of dough, oh for sure. Working around the clock, sometimes I need me more than 24.
Go hands here,
Okay.
and then basically like with the ball, when you roll and lift.
Okay.
We're gonna go 20 total. The distance you roll that forward will dictate how hard this is.
Head to toe, said you got your own style, that's just like for you, ain't got it though. Talking like you got it, that's a problem, I might let them know. Freeze you like a mouse or something,